The fitna is going to increase. The pattern that we expect to see is all the values will be inverted. The values will be turned upside down. What is right will be redefined as wrong. What is wrong will be redefined as right. What is virtue will be redefined as vice. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله وصحبه أجمعين. Talking about the knowledge, the science of the end of time has been approached from many sides. We choose the side that is absolutely correct, which is built on revelation, which is the knowledge that the Prophet ﷺ has left us. He has left us detailed knowledge of the end of time, literally dozens of hadith describing something close to 200 signs that are today easily identifiable. And if you study these signs closely enough and extract the pattern that emerges from them, then we can learn the laws that govern the development of history at the end of time. So that is the precious heritage that the Prophet left us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The other side, the other camp, is doing its best to dilute this and introduce in it a lot of false interpretation of the things described in the hadith, so as to divert people from the real purpose of all this knowledge that was left us, which is to help us navigate the dangers of the end of time and successfully negotiate all the obstacles that are constantly put in our way to prevent us from reaching Allah in paradise. When the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the people of his house, his descendants, are like the ark of Noah, and that those who board the ark will be saved and those who do not will perish, will drown, the reference was to the description in the Quran of the flood of Sayyidina Nuh as mountain-high waves, a raging tempest in the middle of the sea, and waves so high that you couldn't see their top, which are quite impossible to survive unless you are in something like Noah's Ark, which sailed by the power of God, who looked after his prophet. Otherwise, without this divine power intervention, you cannot possibly, through your own devices, survive such a tempest. So the delusions, the temptation, the seditions, the discord, the fitna of the end of time was described in the Quran as mountain-high waves. You can imagine how in dire need of guidance in those days we are, and we must be quite certain that the Prophet did his best to leave us all the knowledge and make sure that it gets to us at the end of time, so that we can, in fact, receive the knowledge, understand it, apply it, see the practical implications, and be saved from all the fitna of this very dangerous time. The fitna is going to increase. The pattern that we expect to see is all the values will be inverted. The values will be turned upside down. What is right will be redefined as wrong. What is wrong will be redefined as right. What is virtue will be redefined as vice or stupidity, and what is vice will be redefined as virtue or liberty or modernism or postmodernism, or one of these things. One of the things that we discuss in Twilight of the World is the science of priorities. The science of priorities is one of the skills bequeathed to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to teach us to order our lives privately and publicly according to the priorities set by Allah and His Prophet, not ours. The priorities set by Allah and His Prophet are obviously different from the kind of priority that people use in everyday life, because in everyday life people are concerned about their physical comforts, their money, secure their future, their children's future, and so on. But Allah and Rasulullah, they consider this a very low priority. The first priority is to get as close as possible to Allah, to know Him, to love Him, to enter His presence in this world before the next. This is the top priority. And then the second priority is to leave this world to go to paradise, not elsewhere. And then the third priority is to lead a virtuous life and to be of benefit to people, not cause any harm, not cause any distress or pain. And then the last priority is to look after your physical and emotional needs and your families. So that is the order of priority. The consequence of this is that Allah and His Prophet ﷺ give priority to everything inward over everything outward. The heart is more important than the body. The intention is more important than the action. Actions are valued according to intentions, not the reverse. The action is good as long as the intention in the heart is good. The action is bad if the intention is bad, even if it looks outwardly to be good. So the inward always has priority. Anything that helps purify the heart is much more important than anything that helps make the body healthier. Anything that puts light into the heart is much more important than anything that makes you more cultured or intellectual in a worldly manner. That is a priority. And the rest of the science of priority deals with every other priority concerned with life on planet Earth. Another obvious thing to connect with what we've just said is that if man, as Muslims conceive of him, is composed of a body, a soul, and a spirit, and each of these has requirements. So according to the priority list of Allah and Rasuluh, the spirit's requirements have to take priority over the soul's requirement, that take priority over the body's requirement. The spirit's requirement are proximity to Allah. Anything that leads to proximity to Allah, virtuous action, dhikr, all acts of worship and devotion, these are food for the spirit. Things that keep the soul under control, that negate the soul that incites to evil, that control the appetites, all this is food for the spirit. The food for the soul consists of two things: emotions and thinking. So food for the soul can consist of worldly emotions like loving other people for one's sake, like loving your spouse, your children, your friends. Intellectual pursuits like learning about literature, history, music, and so on. All this is food for the soul. But the real food for the soul is the knowledge that leads to the purification of the heart and leads to the spirit actually gaining complete supremacy over the other two components. The food for the body is the physical food. The body needs food, it needs to sleep, it needs a shelter, it needs a roof over its head, it needs, all these needs belong to the body. And you are quite allowed, legally speaking, to pursue these ends on condition that they don't interfere or negate the requirements of the spirit. So that's the order of priority according to how we were taught by Allah and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the most important topics discussed in Twilight of the World is that of the Khawarij. Khawarij means outlaws, means renegades. It means that they have shot out the widest possible circle of Islam and therefore are outside the pale of Islam. They've shot out, they're no longer Muslims, although they look and speak as if they were. They are one of the most lethal dangers to the Muslim community and will remain so until the end of time. They started even before Imam Ali and they are bound to continue until Imam al-Mahdi and the Dajjal. One of the most dangerous warnings given us by the Prophet ﷺ is that he said that the last of them will join the Dajjal. Although they will recognize him at the Dajjal, they will recognize he is an impostor, they will recognize he is the impostor of the end of time, and yet they will join him. So that is how dangerous they are, because when they join him, they will take with them all those who were deceived by them, who believe in them, who followed them. And these may be thousands of ignorant young men who have no clue of where they're going. Now, the story of the Khawarij started with Imam Ali, and the Prophet ﷺ described two kinds of Khawarij. The first generation of Khawarij that appeared during Imam Ali's lifetime, and the subsequent generations of Khawarij that are bound to come one after the other until the end of time. There is a description for the first generation and another description for the rest of them, including those who live among us today. Those who were against Imam Ali were described in such detail that he recognized them even by their faces and their names. He knew them one by one. He knew who they were and what they were up to, because the Prophet had told him. And as for those who remain a danger until today, he described them as people who shoot out of religion and never come back, by which obviously is not meant all of them, but the leaders. These are the true Khawarij. And he said that there will be people, when you watch them, you will despise your prayers compared to theirs, you will despise your fasting compared to theirs, and they will recite the Quran better than you, but it will not go beyond their collarbones, it will not go into their hearts, it will stay on their tongues. And this description we can see all around us today. People who pray very correctly according to the rules of Sharia, they fast very correctly according to the rules of Sharia, they do everything right, but their hearts are black. Their hearts are devoid of knowledge. They're not seeking the real knowledge of the Prophet, they're following their whims, their passions, their emotions. Their main illness is kibr, arrogance. They think they know everything, everybody else is ignorant, they think they're right, everybody else is wrong, to the extent that they think everybody else is kafir and they're the only believing people on the face of the planet. But the verdict of Rasulullah stands until today, that people who think themselves superior to all others, who think that their interpretation of the Quran, this is arrogance, this is the illness, the catastrophic illness of shaitan, which got him expelled from the presence of Allah, from paradise, got him in fact expelled from the mercy of Allah. He was the first renegade, he was the first outlaw, and those of our community who follow on his footsteps suffer from the same illness, arrogance. They think they're better than everybody else, and everybody else is so ignorant they deserve to die, in fact. And this is exactly what ISIS was about, and this is what the next generation of Khawarij will be about. So this is a subject that has to be studied in detail and in depth, so that whenever these people come up with their interpretations of the Quran and Sunnah, then we know how the Prophet described them, we know how he told us to recognize them, how to recognize their way of thinking and their way of acting, and how to protect ourselves against them. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.